I'm Steve Keogh, a former Scotland Yard murder detective inspector. I'm going to take you deep inside murder investigations.
So he had 11 stab wounds to his body. We had no sort of clue about who was responsible.
Opening my contacts book for the first time to reveal the secrets of what it really takes to be a murder detective.
Your heart's in your mouth, you know, I was literally shaking.
On the front line, exposing how we solve the most heinous of crimes.
The pain of losing your son, it can wake you up.
Welcome to Secrets of a Murder Detective. The murder of Champion Ganda in May of 2013 was one of East London's most testing cases. I'm going to be meeting one of the senior officers on the case to discuss what really happened, the pressures, the setbacks, and the methods they used to eventually bring the killer to justice.
My name is Peguy Benton. I'm a retired Detective Chief Inspector. I retired from the Metropolitan Police Homicide Command. I've dealt with over 100 investigations, but this case will always stay with me.
Peguy, thanks for coming in.
Hi, Steve. Nice to meet you again.
Cheers. So the case we're talking about, what happened and what's your first knowledge of the case?
I was a detective sergeant on one of the murder investigation teams. I was actually in the office on the day the murder occurred, and I remember getting a phone call to say that there'd been a stabbing outside a school in Forest Gate, and that local officers had attended, and they were treating 2 people.
Emergency which service?
There were a number of 999 calls made, not only from the school where the incident happened, but there was a number of residents as well in the area, in the street where it happened, who called police, who had witnessed the incident. So straight away I knew obviously it was serious, and so we had to deploy officers to the scene to try and find out initially what has gone on, whether there was any suspects, ultimately to try and preserve life and find out the sort of status of the 2 people that were stabbed.
When your officers arrived at the scene, what information were they given about what had happened?
So they were initially told by local officers that there'd been an incident where 2 males had been involved in a fight with at least 3 males, and that 3 males had run away. One of the victims had been stabbed in the buttocks, and he was being described as almost like a walking wounded person. The other person had suffered life-threatening injuries and was being treated by emergency services. Police officers who arrived at the scene quickly ascertained the names of the 2 boys that had been stabbed. The boy that was walking wounded was quickly identified as Shaquille Davis, and he identified his friend who was seriously injured as Champion Ganda. It was quite obvious early on that Champion had received a number of stab wounds to the right side of his body.
I remember, it's just like it was yesterday. I remember it was a normal morning. My name is Peguy Kato. I'm Champion Ganda's mom. Then I saw a phone call me, my daughter, telling me that, Mom, they stabbed Champion. Then I asked my daughter, where is he? She said that Mom is in the forest gate, they stab him. I said to my daughter, then I'm coming. She said that Mom is serious. I said, yes, I'm coming.
The officers obviously had to treat Champion as best they could, and they were trying to perform life-saving treatment whilst they waited for the paramedics to take over. It was horrendous because you had lots of people shouting, you had lots of people screaming, you had Shaquille walking around, not really engaging with the police officers who were trying to save the life of his friend.
Then I was driving and she called me again. She said, Mom, Champion passed away. And then I said, what do you mean that he passed away? Then she said, Mom, he died. I said, what do you mean that he died? I said, Mom, I said he died. I said to my daughter, I'm coming.
The paramedics tried to do everything they could to save Champion's life, but unfortunately, despite their best efforts, Champion passed away at the scene, and it was very traumatic for everybody.
And I said, no, he cannot die. Thinking in my head that I have to go there because I know Champion first, he loved life, he loved me, he loved his mother and sister. He cannot die. Then I said, I have to go pray with him. And then he woke up. When I go there, I see the police in Catherine Road. I said to them that our Champion's mom, the police officer said to me that you cannot go there, but I need to go see my son because Champion don't know how to pray. He need me, so we need to pray. Now they said to me that go to the police station and then one police officer will talk to you so they can tell you if it's your son or no. I said maybe it's not Champion.
In my experience, it's really difficult when a family member turns up for a number of reasons. One, often they want to be sure, they want to be able to see that it is, in this instance, it is Champion. Someone saying my son, my sister, my brother has died. I want to make sure. I want to see this for myself. And also, as well, sometimes they just want to say goodbye and give a last cuddle or something, which is completely understandable, isn't it?
Yeah, it's absolutely heartbreaking. But obviously you have to be very diplomatic. You have to explain to them the process and the procedures. We're just trying to preserve everything that we can to try and get the best outcome for the families, which might then ultimately lead to justice.
I went to the police station. They put me in the room. And the police officer come. He said to me that, Mom, yes, it's your son, Champion. I still didn't believe him. But I remember standing in the window, and then I started to shout louder, Champion, Champion. Then I say, he cannot go. I say, God, I want my son. I want my son, I want Champion. And then I say, screaming his name.
The next consideration is preserving the crime scene, and everything you want to do it as quickly as possible. So you want to sort of preserve the scenes, preserve any forensic evidence, which is crucial, that might help you identify who's responsible.
If you don't get there and evidence is lost, particularly maybe witnesses that are there or some kind of forensic evidence, you only get one chance at this, don't you?
Yes, scene management is crucial to any investigation, and that there were a number of witnesses nearby, including people that worked at the school, who were in shock at that time. What they saw was obviously very traumatic. They gave detailed descriptions and detailed accounts of what happened to the officers at the scene initially.
What were they saying that they saw?
So they were walking through the school playground at the time, and they saw basically a coming together between two people that had come from sort of one end of the road, Los Angeles Road, and a group of three that had come from the other end, and that there was a big fight between them. They saw weapons being used. They described belts being swung by both sort of groups, and then they saw the boys being stabbed, basically.
You didn't have a lot to go on at this stage. You were given some descriptions. What were they?
They were described as black males. The clothing was quite generic. One of the things that stood out is that one of the potential persons was quite small compared to the other two. In those first sort of few hours, we had no sort of idea, no motive. We had no sort of clue about who was responsible.
During a murder investigation, an officer will be designated as a family liaison officer.
I'm actually a trained family liaison officer, so when I joined the murder command initially as like detective constable, I always wanted to help people, which is one of the reasons why I became a police officer.
They are essentially the link between the victim's family and loved ones and the investigation team.
So I met with Champion's mother and sister, Peggy and Jennifer, and the family, because obviously they had so many questions about why the champion had been killed, and it's heartbreaking to see because you just initially can't answer that question.
In my head, it was just thinking what he can done wrong for someone to kill him. What he done to make them to do this to him. Why he deserve it.
The job of the family liaison officer can be extremely difficult, particularly at the early stages where emotions and feelings are very raw.
Champion was just a normal boy, like every young boy, and he was very funny. He had to do something just to make people laugh, and he was happy boy, enjoy football. For him, he was thinking that it would be like Ronaldo, and he was dreaming to becoming bigger. He always look after me, and when we go out, someone's look at me. Champion will look the person to make sure that why you look at my mom like this. So he was protecting, you know. He was also do the same thing with his friend. That's why I never understand. He was very young, but this is the way Champion was.
A huge part of the murder investigation team is building up a picture of your victim. What did you learn about Champion?
So we learnt that Champion was very much into his music, and he'd released some music out into sort of social media. I also know that he was involved in football, and I believe he was at Arsenal Academy when he was younger. Champion was, say, a very much loved son, and you know, initially we could not identify kind of any motive of why anyone would want to kill him.
In any murder investigation, victimology is crucial. An understanding of a victim's lifestyle, their habits, the people that they associate with, their friends, their enemies. Do they commit crime? Do they owe money to anybody? All factors that may lead into a motive for a murder. And it will be the job of the family liaison officer to try and extract that information from the family.
Champion, I didn't see him for 1 month before he passed away. He was living with my mom because when Champion was 16, he has been stabbed in the leg in Homeford. So near my house here, it was some boy, they wanted to beat his friends, and they ran, and he come back to fight this person because he didn't want to leave his friends beat up with this boy. Me, I'm thinking that it was dangerous for him to live in my house. I said that he have to go to my mom for few time, so these people are not going to attack him again. But I spoke to him 1 week before he died. I remember Champion all the time when we talk on the phone. When I say, I love you, he never say anything. When I say, Champion, I love you, we say anything. But 1 week before he died, I said to him that I love you. He said, I love you too, Mom.
There's nothing you can do that will ever take away the pain that they're suffering, and it is heartbreaking, and it's something that will always stay with you. And you know, you try not to let it affect you, but of course it affects you. Like I say, you wouldn't be human if it didn't affect you.
Is there anything that Peggy could do to help with the investigation?
Yeah, so obviously one of the biggest factors for me in that initial investigation and for the team was that, you know, Shaquille was crucial. You know, he was present. We believed that he had vital information about who was responsible.
To Shaquille? Oh, they was best friends. Because me, I didn't like the friendship. And there's no reason. I don't have no reason to not to like him, but I never just liked the friendship.
He was really reluctant to speak, and it was really frustrating because you'd think that he just witnessed his friend being stabbed and killed, so you'd like to think he'd want to help the investigation, but he was very, very difficult to deal with from that initial outcome. He just refused to give any sort of detailed account of what had happened.
That's really frustrating, isn't it?
It was incredibly frustrating because all we're trying to do is find out who's responsible and why and get justice for the family. You know, we came up against a wall of silence in this case.
And the only person supposed to tell me everything was Shakir, because he was the last person who saw him. But he never said anything to me. I tried so many times to talk to him, but he never said anything.
We had to keep an open mind about the potential motives, but certainly one line of inquiry was potentially this being gang-related. We know that from sort of information and intelligence we had that Shaquille was linked to a local gang called the Blood City Gang. Whether Champion was the intended target or whether it was actually meant to be Shaquille was more the intended target, all these sort of factors were being considered by the team at the time.
So your team are under pressure to identify who it was that stabbed and killed Champion. One of the processes that your officers and the crime scene manager, whoever there would have done, would be to look at the scene and see if there's anything within it that proved forensics, whether blood or DNA has been left by a suspect, could be taken away, sent to a laboratory and examined for anything that could give clues to who did this. Was there anything in that scene that happened to?
There was a number of swabs of blood from the actual crime scene, but then there was also a piece of belt buckle that was found at the scene. We didn't know at that stage whether it was from the victims, from Champion or Shaquille, or whether it belonged to one of the suspects. And that was recovered from the scene. It could have been left by anybody.
In modern day murder investigations, especially a built-up area like London, CCTV is going to play a key role. What was the CCTV picture in this case?
So in this investigation, the initial CCTV parameters were around the school, and so the footage was viewed and it actually did capture the incident in pretty much the entirety. It showed that Champion and Shaquille were coming from in one direction down the road, and the three others came from the opposite direction, and ultimately they saw each other, and the CCTV shows that they're kind of taunting each other. There's a bit of gesticulation, but then Champion and Shaquille kind of turn away to walk away, and they walk away a short distance, being followed by one of the males. Unfortunately, then Shaquille decided to turn around and go back to confront the group, and then Champion obviously goes back with him, and that's when the CCTV shows a fight between the two groups. It shows a belt being swung, it shows sort of punches being thrown, and footage behind a vehicle where it shows that Champion is being stabbed repeatedly. You could see the movements, but unfortunately the quality of the CCTV was not sort of sufficient to help identify individuals at that time.
It must be a bittersweet moment. On one hand, you've captured it, which is, as a murder investigator, that's what you're looking for. But on the other hand, it's not quite good enough to be able to say who's who.
Again, it was another frustrating element to this investigation.
In any murder, a cause of death is really important, isn't it? And that's going to be achieved by holding a post-mortem examination. How did that go?
The cause of death is vital to any homicide because you have to prove the cause of death was a homicide. So he had 11 stab wounds to his body, mainly on the right side, which caused his lung to collapse. Some of the stab wounds actually chipped the bone in Champion, which actually shows the ferocity of the person that actually stabbed him a number of times. That's a horrible amount for anyone to suffer, and that's what makes, you know, almost like the determination of the team even more so. We wanted to appeal to any members of the public that had information, and so the DCI at the time made a public appeal for information. We were then contacted by a schools officer to say that a local schoolboy had come forward to say that they were in a local KFC shortly after the murder in the afternoon, about 4:30 in the afternoon, and he overheard a group of males come into the KFC and then talk about stabbing somebody and the knife being bloody.
So you dispatched officers to KFC to obtain their CCTV?
Yes.
What did that show?
It showed a number of individuals in KFC, which, you know, loosely kind of matched the description of what the witnesses had described people being involved in the murder. So the officers that were reviewing the CCTV footage from the KFC then managed to track back in the local area the movements of these individuals, and what it then showed is that shortly before the murder, 3 males were seen approaching a nearby taxi company on the same road, getting into a nearby taxi and driving in the area towards Forest Gate Police Station. The officers spent painstaking hours reviewing all that footage, tracking that taxi to see its movements, to see where it had gone, and trying to sort of see how it would have come either in contact with Champion and Shaquille. So at this point in time we had 3 pieces of crucial CCTV footage from the school itself, from the KFC, and from nearby to the taxi company.
I'm Ashley Windsor, forensic image analyst and expert witness.
We then had to request the use of a CCTV expert to provide sort of a comparison analysis to help show that all the people on all the different clips of footage were the same 3 people in all of those clips.
So I was presented with a limited set of video clips in different formats. I had 2 sets of footage that were suitable for carrying out identification through facial comparison. However, the rest of the footage was pretty poor. In fact, it was impossible to carry out any facial identification on any of the other footage. But what it did have were a number of figures moving together through different camera views, and finally a number of figures who got together at the scene of the incident. So this was more of a tracking exercise. Could I follow these 3 people and be confident that I was finding the same 3 people in different sets of footage? You have to look at the entire package of the person, which includes their build, their relative height to other persons. Are they taller than other persons? Are they shorter than other persons around them? I managed to find some fine detail on the jacket of one individual, and he was the shortest individual. This would indicate that this person is the same build, wearing the same clothes as the person I've recognised. And in my opinion, there was strong image support. It's the same person.
Perry Benton and his team would have been getting a huge amount of information coming into their investigation. And the best way in order to deal with this and make sense of it is to put it onto a timeline, to chronologically lay out the information, to see how events unfolded and how they relate to each other.
When the officers tracked these 3 males going into the taxi office to order a taxi, that was like a huge moment. But for us then the priority was to try and locate that taxi. The forensic value of that taxi was enormous. So from the CCTV investigation that was being conducted, and what we were able to show is that the taxi actually drove past Champion and Shaquille at one point in one of the residential streets. And so because of that almost chance meeting, Champion and Shaquille were seen by the people in the taxi. The taxi then carried on driving past Champion and Shaquille. It stopped in a nearby residential street. 3 males are seen to get out of the taxi and go back a couple of streets, where they then confront Champion and Shaquille.
During some murder investigations, the use of police intelligence may be vital in identifying those involved in a murder. The methods used might include the use of police informants, Crime Stoppers, and various covert methods available to police.
We then received some intelligence indicating that a boy called Armani Lynch and a boy called Marvin Simos were involved, and so they quickly became sort of focus for the investigation to try and identify where they were. We conducted some inquiries regarding the taxi company and managed to identify the driver and recover the taxi. When we conducted a forensic examination of the taxi, we managed to recover fingerprints linking Armani Lynch to the taxi. There was also a sample of blood from the rear seat of the taxi, which was submitted for a forensic examination. At the same time, we then received the results back from the lab regarding the belt buckle, which gave us a partial DNA profile indicating that the contributor was mainly Marvin Simos. We were confident that Armani Lynch and Marvin Simos were two of the three that were involved, and it was our job now to find the third person.
So now your investigation is really gathering a pace.
Identifying the taxi in the case was absolutely monumental. It was sort of game-changing. We then managed to get that forensic breakthrough, naming Devontae Clifford as being the person whose blood was found in the back of the taxi. And that was huge for the investigation team, because it now gave us a name of that third person. You know, Devontae Clifford was the third person involved.
You've got three names: Simos, Clifford and Lynch. What now would be important is building up an intelligence picture of these three people. What did that show you?
Well, that showed us that Armani Lynch and Marvin Simos were heavily linked to the Custom House gang, who were from Newham, and that also they were associated to Devontae Clifford. He wasn't as well known to the police at that time as they were. So we conducted a manhunt inquiry to try and locate them. We established quite early that Devontae Clifford fled the UK shortly after the murder and travelled to St Lucia.
So manhunts can be quick, or they can take a long time. How long did it take for you to find the first of these individuals?
So Lynch was found hiding on the 14th of May, so within 5 days of the murder, and he was arrested. And then the manhunt team sort of were then looking for Simos, and they found him sort of a week or so later hiding at an address in Sussex.
When Lynch and Simos were arrested and held at the police station and interviewed, did they say anything to you?
No, they had legal representation during the interview process, but they both declined to answer any questions and made no comment.
As information is coming in, is there anything that was telling you what could have been a motive for Champion's murder?
So, as a result of our research into the investigation, we identified that there'd been a stabbing 3 days before the murder of Champion, which Shaquille Davis was allegedly involved in, and we think that was then the backstory and the motive behind this, and that, you know, Lynch, Simos and Clifford then sought retribution for that earlier incident. When we started to look into these individuals' backgrounds, they were members of a Custom House gang, who actually in turn were rivals of the Blood City gang, which Shaquille was connected with.
Champion died the 9th of May, and we buried Champion on the 1st of June. When they come with Champion's body, so we can go to the church, just to see the car. It was so hard. It was so difficult. So difficult. Everyone was there. It was a big funeral. I never see so many people like that. There were so many young people, many Congolese people, some people from the Champion School, the teachers, even from the college. So many people, so many friends. I remember when we finished the funeral, we have to come back home. My kids have to go back to school. My house was so dark. Everything was just like electricity cut off in the house. So we was not talking a lot. I was crying by myself. The pain of losing your son, it can wake you up. The pain is so strong, you can sleep and the pain will wake you up, and you feel like your heart is getting in pieces.
So you have two arrested quite early, but Clifford is in St Lucia, and that clearly adds a layer of complication to your investigation. What did you do? How did you go about trying to extradite him back to the UK?
So there had never been a UK extradition with St Lucia before. So one of the things we had to closely do is form a good, close working relationship with the Crown Prosecution Service. It has to be also what they call trial ready before you can extradite somebody back to the UK. So in other words, the whole of the investigation has to be as complete as possible. It was very frustrating for the family, and we had many, many conversations with the family that the team were doing everything they could to get justice for them. You know, because of that, and because of obviously the challenges in the investigation as a whole, Lynch and Simos were released on bail because we just didn't have the evidence to charge them initially.
And it was so difficult, and there was no answer. There were so many questions, but there was no answer. And no one didn't say anything to me. Shakir never said anything to me. The police didn't have enough to say to me because they were still doing investigation.
How long did it take before you got a decision on whether or not they were going to charge?
It took almost 2 years of lengthy investigation. When we finally got that authority to charge from the Crown Prosecution Service, from the reviewing lawyer and from the council, it was just, you know, it was really emotional. It was one of those moments where, you know, the team had worked so long, and, you know, they were vindicated with the hard work of the team. So, yeah, it was a great feeling, but we knew that there was a lot of hard work still to come.
Perry Benton was a very experienced murder investigator with over 17 years of investigating murders. And in that time, the investigation into Champion Ganda's death was the longest investigation he had been involved in. And that journey would be one taken by the family too. And it was a journey of frustration, ups and downs, probably more downs than ups. And those fears that actually we're not going to get justice for our son or our brother, fears that those that have committed it are going to walk away scot-free, would have been in their mind throughout.
On the 15th of December, Armani Lynch was finally charged with the murder of Champion Ganda and the attempted murder of Shaquille Davis. Marvin Simos was subsequently charged after that, and they were both then held in custody, awaiting trial.
So they were going to go to trial now and stand trial for the murder of Champion. But at the same time, in St Lucia, there was a third person. Now, that can cause a complication, can't it? For if you go to trial, you've got multiple people involved in an event, and one of them isn't there.
Yeah, so for us as an investigation team, it was certainly concerning, because we were worried that if we had a trial with just Lynch and Simos, that they could potentially blame the third person and say it wasn't us, it was him. And then subsequently, if we ever then extradited Clifford back to the UK, that when he came back to the UK and stood trial, he would then blame the other two and say it wasn't me, it was the other two. And that's why, like I say, we pressed the St Lucian authorities to try and arrange for that extradition to be done as soon as possible. And I think it's only when they realised the urgency of the need to bring Clifford back to the UK is when they finally granted their first ever UK extradition from St Lucia.
There must have been a huge release for the team.
It was a monumental occasion when I got a phone call early in the morning to say that he'd been arrested out in St Lucia, and you know, we then liaised with the Met Police extradition team, who then travelled out to St Lucia and liaised with the local authorities there and brought him back to the UK, where he was then arrested at the UK airport.
When they pick up this boy from St Lucia, they contact me. They said to me, Peggy, we have the boy back in UK now, which I was so happy.
So the original trial date for Lynch and Simos was postponed whilst Clifford was brought back to the UK.
So now you're going to go to trial with all three standing in the box together?
Yes.
When Perry and his team were first assigned this murder investigation, little did they know how challenging it was going to be. These challenges would have made this investigation really, really hard on the team. It would have been draining, it would have been emotional. How long actually did it take to get to this point from the day Champion was murdered to actually the start of the first trial?
It was just about 3 years in total.
So by the time they get to court, it would have been a relief. But at the same time, they knew the challenge was only just starting. Getting somebody to court is one thing, getting them convicted is something else. It's the first day of the trial. How are you feeling now?
Really nervous, but also relieved that we'd got to that point. But you don't know what the defence are going to do. You know from experience the defence are going to use every trick in the book to try and get their client off.
What sort of defence did they each put across?
When Simos gave evidence, he said that basically he would talk about himself and talk about his actions on that day. He denied stabbing anyone. He admitted being present at the scene. He actually finally admitted that the belt buckle was his belt buckle, which was a eureka moment because at that time the police only had a partial DNA, but he finally admitted it was his belt buckle. He was not prepared to talk about what Lynch or what Clifford done. Lynch was very arrogant throughout the whole trial. He claimed that he wasn't present at the scene.
Simos and Lynch, they was laughing. They was laughing. Even I remember one day coroner, he was explaining the way Champion has been stabbed. This boy was laughing. It was so awful. And Lynch, you can see this boy have like no emotion, no regrets. He was so proud. He didn't have no sympathy, no love.
Armani Lynch during the trial was, his behaviour was horrendous. He'd even on one occasion got associates to come to court and be in the public gallery to intimidate Devonte Clifford before Devonte Clifford was due to give evidence. We had to then put special measures in at the court to protect the public gallery. So when Devonte Clifford finally gave evidence, he was the kind of first person to admit that the stabber was Armani Lynch, and he actually said it was Armani that had stabbed Champion, and he said that yes, he was involved in the fight, but he was defending himself and that he accepted that he had Champion in a headlock at one point, but it was actually Armani that came round and then stabbed Champion and Shaquille. It was a real turning point, and it corroborated what we suspected and what we believed. Lynch, Simos and Clifford were in a taxi going to Forest Gate police station because Simos had to sign on at the police station because he had bail conditions for previous unrelated matters that he was on bail. And it was the fact that they were in a taxi and they actually drove past Champion and Shaquille made actually this incident unfortunately happen. And if they hadn't seen them as they went past in the taxi, then this would never have happened and Champion would have been alive. But it was certainly gang rivalry that was playing a part in this unfortunate murder.
Every day I was going to the court, I was saying tomorrow I'm not going. Because all the time I was going to the court, I was sick. And the next day I said I'm not going to go. But when it's coming the next day, you're thinking, if I'm not going, Champion will be sad. Because I want to be there for him. I didn't want him to be there by himself. So I said, I have to go. Then I have to go again. Then I have to go again.
During the course of many murder investigations, what will quite often happen is an application from defence or the judge themselves may decide to add an extra indictment of manslaughter. Did that happen in this case?
So yeah, once the evidence was near the conclusion, the trial judge, Wendy Joseph, decided that when the jury would go out to consider their verdict, that she would then give them an extra indictment to consider being manslaughter. If they didn't think it was a murder case, that they could still convict somebody of manslaughter. Now, for murder, you have to have the intention to kill or cause really serious harm. And as far as the prosecution case was, this was a case of murder all day long. You know, Champion had been stabbed 11 times. That meant that somebody had intended to cause, at the very least, serious harm, if not intended to kill.
There comes a time at any trial where the jury have to retire and make their decision, and you're now reliant on these 12 members of the public to make their mind up about what should happen to the defendants. How long did they go out to do deliberations?
The jury were out for a couple of days, and it is one of the most stressful times of any criminal trial.
Everybody shuffles into the court, sits down, and you're sat there and you're waiting for the verdict. So you're there now, what are you thinking?
Your heart's in your mouth. You know, I was literally shaking because it'd been 3 years of hard work by the team, of dedication, and you're now literally waiting for those jury members to come back. You hope you've done enough, you believe you've done enough, but you just never know.
So the court usher will say to the jury foreperson, have you reached a decision at which you all agree? They would have said yes. What happened then?
The juries found Marvin Simmons not guilty of murder or manslaughter, and they found Devontae Clifford not guilty of murder or manslaughter. But for Armani Lynch, they found him guilty of manslaughter.
Not guilty of murder.
And not guilty of murder.
How does that feel?
Your heart sinks to a degree. Whilst you have to respect the jury's decision, you know, as a team, when you put so much work into proving all three were at the scene, they were all involved in the attack and the fighting with Champion and Shaquille, it's hard to comprehend how the jury would see that if you stab someone 11 times, how that could be manslaughter.
Jury to decide that it was a manslaughter, which I don't understand. Manslaughter to stab someone 11 times, for me, is not correct.
So we have to respect the jury's decision, but it was heartbreaking that Lynch was only convicted of manslaughter. He was then subsequently sentenced to 14 years. It meant that he would be off the streets for a number of years, that the streets of London would be safer without him. But it didn't feel like justice for the family. It felt like he'd got away with it, and that's really hard to take.
It's something I'll never understand it. Because this boy, when he come out, he's gonna kill again. He's a killer.
Sometimes you can read into the sentence passed by a judge, 14 years for manslaughter of a juvenile. That's quite a substantial sentence, and for me, reflects that this was on the upper end of the scale of manslaughter.
This was as close to murder as any trial and any investigation will ever be. So I believe this was a chance encounter, and that Champion was basically in the wrong place at the wrong time. He went to help his friend who decided to confront these three individuals and paid the ultimate sacrifice for that.
And it must have been a terrifying moment for Champion, his last few moments, to be stabbed 11 times in those circumstances. I can't even begin to imagine. I can't even begin to think of the trauma that he was feeling in those last few seconds as his life ebbed away. It doesn't even bear thinking about.
As a father of three myself, you know, I can't even begin to comprehend how you would even start to get over. And so I have so much admiration for Peguy.
The mother was for Champion before, and the mother I am now is two different mothers. But the mother I am now, no one teach me about this. The pain make me to change. The loss make me to change. But if I was the mother I am today for Champion, maybe it would be different.
And it was heartbreaking to see, you know, how the 3 years had impacted Champion's family, and, you know, the devastation that Lynch caused that family. It's something that I'll never ever forget.
So doing good things today, this will make me to live my life now, because I'm still doing Champion's job. I'm still Champion's mom. I'm still talking about him. So I'll be Champion's mom forever.
At the early stages, where our emotions and feelings are very raw,
Champion was just a normal boy, like every young boys, and he was very funny. He had to do something just to make people laugh, and he was happy boy, enjoy football. For him, he was thinking that it would be like Ronaldo, and he was dreaming to becoming bigger. He always look after me, and when we go out, someone's look at me. Champion will look the person to make sure that why you look at my mom like this. So he was protecting, you know. He was also do the same thing with his friend. That's why I never understand. He was very young, but this is the way Champion was.
a huge part of a murder investigation team is building up a picture of your victim. What did you learn about Champion?
So we learnt that Champion was very much into his music, and he'd released some music out into sort of social media. I also know that he was involved in football, and I believe he was at Arsenal Academy when he was younger. Champion was, say, a very much loved son, and you know, initially we could not identify kind of any motive of why anyone would want to kill him.
In any murder investigation, victimology is crucial. An understanding of a victim's lifestyle, their habits, the people they associate with, their friends, their enemies. Do they commit crime? Do they owe money to anybody? All factors that may lead into a motive for a murder. And it will be the job of the family liaison officer to try and extract that information from the family.
Champion, I didn't see him for 1 month before he passed away. He was living with my mom because when Champion was 16, he has been stabbed in the leg in Homeford.
Kirewasu waku waku onasera mogegujo nakimochi wea wea yamikabu sekai watakai kedo tajonan kana mabu sikigute yami no hoga sumato. Shoku desu Tayo Nankama pusite Yami No pogamu ge Do desu Doki 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 Tayo Bakama pusiku de yami ho Gasutiki Ni aya naria kai kai kau Amisa moyo kalitamato Ute kirewasu Waku waku onasera Mogegujo nakimochi Wea wea yamikabu Sekai watakai kedo tajonan kana.
Schools officer to say that a local schoolboy had come forward to say that they were in a local KFC shortly after the murder in the afternoon, about 4:30 in the afternoon, and he overheard a group of males come into the KFC and then talk about stabbing somebody and the knife being bloody.
So you dispatched officers to KFC to obtain their CCTV?
Yes.
What did that show?
It showed a number of individuals in KFC, which, loosely kind of matched the description of what the witnesses had described, people being involved in the murder. So the officers that were reviewing the CCTV footage from the KFC then managed to track back in the local area the movements of these individuals, and what it then showed is that shortly before the murder, 3 males were seen approaching a nearby taxi company on the same road, getting into a nearby taxi and driving in the area towards Forest Gate Police Station. The officers spent painstaking hours reviewing all that footage, tracking that taxi to see its movements, to see where it had gone, and trying to sort of see how it would have come either in contact with Champion and Shaquille. So at this point in time, we had 3 pieces of crucial CCTV footage from the school itself, from the KFC, and from nearby to the taxi company.
I'm Ashley Windsor, forensic image analyst and expert witness.
We then had to request the use of a CCTV expert to provide sort of a comparison analysis to help show that all the people on all the different clips of footage were the same 3 people in all of those clips.
So I was presented with a limited set of video clips in different formats. I had 2 sets of footage that were suitable for carrying out identification through facial comparison. However, the rest of the footage was pretty poor. In fact, it was impossible to carry out any facial identification on any of the other footage. But what it did have were a number of figures moving together through different camera views, and finally a number of figures who got together at the scene of the incident. So this was more of a tracking exercise. Could I follow these 3 people and be confident that I was finding the same 3 people in different sets of footage? You have to look at the entire package of the person, which includes their build, their relative height to other persons. Are they taller than other persons? Are they shorter than other persons around them? I managed to find some fine detail on the jacket of one individual, and he was the shortest individual. This would indicate that this person is the same build, wearing the same clothes as the person I've recognised. And in my opinion, there was strong image support. It's the same person.
Perry Benton and his team would have been getting a huge amount of information coming into their investigation. And the best way in order to deal with this and make sense of it is to put it onto a timeline, to chronologically lay out the information, to see how events unfolded and how they relate to each other.
When the officers tracked these 3 males going into the taxi office to order a taxi, that was like a huge moment. But for us then the priority was to try and locate that taxi. The forensic value of that taxi was enormous. So from the CCTV investigation that was being conducted, and what we were able to show is that the taxi actually drove past Champion and Shaquille at one point in one of the residential streets. And so because of that almost chance meeting, Champion and Shaquille was seen by the people in the taxi. The taxi then carried on driving past Champion and Shaquille. It stopped in a nearby residential street. 3 males are seen to get out of the taxi and go back a couple of streets, where they then confront Champion and Shaquille.
During some murder investigations, the use of police intelligence may be vital in identifying those involved in a murder. The methods used might include the use of police informants, Crime Stoppers, and various covert methods available to police.
We then received some intelligence indicating that a boy called Armani Lynch and a boy called Marvin Simos were involved, and so they quickly became sort of focus for the investigation to try and identify where they were. We conducted some inquiries regarding the taxi company and managed to identify the driver and recover the taxi. When we conducted a forensic examination of the taxi, we managed to recover fingerprints linking Armani Lynch to the taxi. There was also a sample of blood from the rear seat of the taxi, which was submitted for a forensic examination. At the same time, we then received the results back from the lab regarding the belt buckle, which gave us a partial DNA profile indicating that the contributor was mainly Marvin Simos. We were confident that Armani Lynch and Marvin Simos were 2 of the 3 that were involved, and it was our job now to find the 3rd person.
So now your investigation is really gathering a pace.
Identifying the taxi in the case was absolutely monumental. It was sort of game-changing. We then managed to get that forensic breakthrough, naming Devoncie Clifford as being the person whose blood was found in the back of the taxi. And that was huge for the investigation team, because it now gave us a name of that 3rd person. You know, Devoncie Clifford was the 3rd person involved.
You've got 3 names, Simos, Clifford and Lynch. What now would be important is building up an intelligence picture of these 3 people. What did that show you?
Well, that showed us that Armani Lynch and Marvin Simos were heavily